Hi, my name is Idham Paul. I'm in the 7th grade, and my NHD project title is called The Rights Movements. The rights movements from the 1850s to the 2000s have fundamentally shaped the trajectory of modern American history, influencing social change, anti-discrimination, authorized privileges, and a ban on ableism and racial slurs. The indigenous thoughts of rights originated in Greece when one of the city-states, Athens, distinguished a formidable way of governing their land. As their teachings were passed on to modern countries such as the USA, it benefited most people because every right and responsibility was cleverly organized and ensured everyone worked and lived in harmony. As of the 1960s, the civil rights movement had one of the most devastating changes in harmony and democracy. Alongside the civil rights movements, there were other significant ones like the women's rights movement and the ADA. For my NHD project, I will discuss all three of these hardships akin to the good and bad of the rights movements. In the present-day United States, advancements in the economy and democracy have improved opportunities for all races and genders. However, in the early 1900s, rights for individuals facing discrimination were minimal, primarily benefiting white men without disabilities. This led to conflicts and movements advocating for civil rights, women's rights, and disability rights. Before the civil rights movements, black individuals faced obstacles despite some legal rights, with Jim Crow laws and literacy tests hampering progress. Activists like Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks emerged to combat these injustices. Similarly, women were unable to own property and had to give all of their earnings to their husband's benefit, which led to a series of conflicts, boycotts, and protests because of all the discrimination women were facing at the time. The perception of mental and physical disabilities has evolved since the 1900s, with advocates pushing for rights like those in the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA. Groups such as the League of the Physically Handicapped played significant roles in promoting the rights of people with disabilities and addressing ableism. The rising actions of these movements had key players. One player is Susan B. Anthony. It was a big struggle for women at this time, and they were continuously fighting for their lives. Susan B. Anthony was a prominent figure in the women's rights movements, advocating for change and playing a significant role in establishing the World Congress of Representative Women. Her most respectful quote was, "Wherever women gather together, failure is impossible." A key player in the civil rights movement was Martin Luther King Jr., who played a crucial role in the movement. He advocated for nonviolent protests and faced arrest for boycotting segregation. This was a time when black people had suffered from violence, discrimination, and racism. John F. Kennedy intervened for his release. His leading quote that inspired many black people was, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can." Judy Heumann played a significant role in this disability rights movement. When it was time of suffering for disabled people, she had to advocate for the rights of the disabled and contribute to major legislation such as the IDEA and the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Judy Heumann's leading quote was, "Disability only becomes a tragedy when society falls to provide the things we need to lead our lives." The main event in the women's rights movement ultimately resulted in women gaining the right to vote, equal pay, and property ownership in 1919 and 1920. This significant milestone was achieved through relentless protests, petitions, and a successful campaign that strategically included a question about women's suffrage on the election ballot in 1911. Leading this effort was Elizabeth Lowe Watson, a prominent figure in the suffrage movement organization, whose strategic coordination and determination played a pivotal role in this historic achievement. The March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom on August 28, 1963, stands as a pivotal moment in the civil rights movement. Led by the iconic Martin Luther King Jr. himself, this historic event brought together an estimated 250,000 participants at the National Mall. King's powerful and impassioned "I Have a Dream" speech during the march continues to resonate deeply, inspiring generations with its vision of equality and justice. This defining moment in history catalyzed change and continues to symbolize the enduring struggle for civil rights and equality. The Capitol Crawl protest on March 12, 1990 was a pivotal moment for disabled rights. It led to the enactment of the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, which banned discrimination in public domains. This historic event was organized by leaders of the disabled organization ADA-PT, including Mark Johnson, Mike Auberger, Bob Kafka, and Stephanie Thomas. The ADA grants individuals with disabilities the same civil rights protections as those based on race, color, sex, national origin, age, and religion. This significant law ensures equal rights for individuals with disabilities in various public domains, such as employment, education, transportation, and accessibility to public and private establishments. The civil rights movement gained momentum through activism, resulting in the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act, which aimed to reduce racial discrimination and promote economic stability for Black Americans. Public opinion on the civil rights movement was mixed. Major events like the Bloody Protest March helped activists gain support, with 58% in favor, 31% opposed, and 10% unsure. Movements in Africa and Asia were tied to the U.S. struggle for equality. Leaders like Gandhi and Nelson Mandela drew inspiration from American civil rights and sought global support. The women's rights movement secured the right to vote, empowering women and leading to improved legal rights, although it also saw a 15% rise in child instability due to changing family dynamics. This involvement fostered support for education and increasing school enrollment. Many men supported the women's rights movement, with about 40% of voters for equal rights being men, although some still viewed women as inferior. Countries like Canada, Australia, and the UK drew inspiration from the American women's rights movement, while France and Germany looked to the US for guidance. Japan and India approached similar ideas cautiously due to cultural differences. The disability rights movement led to the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, increasing employment opportunities for individuals with disabilities by 10% and improving public accessibility. People without disabilities often feel sympathy for those with disabilities, viewing them as needing protection instead of equality. Some oppose the ADA Act, leading to discrimination and social segregation, while others recognize the unfair treatment of disabled individuals, resulting in varied opinions on disability rights. The United Nations promotes the rights of people with disabilities, advocating for equal opportunities and setting annual goals. While views on disability rights differ by country, most support efforts to advance these rights. In conclusion, the rights movements from the 1850s to the 2000s have fundamentally shaped the trajectory of modern American history, influencing social change, anti-discrimination, authorized privileges, and a ban on ableism and racial slurs. In 1963, the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedoms emerged as a pivotal event advocating for civil rights in the United States, during which MLK Jr. delivered his seminal I Have a Dream speech. The women's rights movement culminated in a significant legislative achievement with the ratification of the 19th Amendment in 1920, which granted women the constitutional right to vote. Furthermore, the disabilities rights movement reached a critical milestone with the enactment of the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, in 1990, a landmark legislation that prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities and underscores the importance of equal rights and accessibility. Ultimately, the rights movement highlights the challenges faced by activists striving for basic human rights, a theme that remains crucial to understanding our history. Recognition towards sos.ca.gov, nps.gov, and britannica.com for the main sources provided for me to utilize on my project. Credits to Microsoft Clipchamp and Sound Recorder for helping me record and employ my documentation. Last but not least, an immense help from my parents for showing me how to use, record, and edit my NHD project.